It's on behalf of these hotels and our employees and the families that they support that we join with the Canadian Travel and Tourism Roundtable today to call on the federal government to remove the pre-departure PCR test for fully vaccinated international visitors. Our local economy depends on it. This one simple measure, in keeping with the Canadian government's expert advisory panel's recommendations, will go some way to make cross-border trips and visits to BC more accessible for families, tourists, and the businesses that make our work possible.
Vancouver is truly an international destination. Prior to the pandemic, we welcomed millions of visitors to our city each year. International visitors are critical to Vancouver's local economy. These are visitors that come here for business meetings, for business events, and for leisure vacations. Annually, these tourism visits contribute roughly $14 billion to Vancouver and Metro Vancouver's visitor economy and support over 100,000 jobs. But since 2020, the tourism sector has been extremely hit. It's been hit very hard by COVID and the necessary health restrictions that have been put in place to ensure that Canadians stay safe. Less international visitors will continue to impact our local businesses and continue to prolong the recovery of the visitor economy. Just want to give you some perspective. Travelers from the United States bring in nearly double what a domestic traveler spends in our destination. And other international visitors spend nearly 3 times as much as a domestic traveler. Business travelers to Vancouver make up 13% of our overnight visitors and contribute approximately $2.6 billion in tourism revenues. Mandatory PCR testing for fully vaccinated travelers keeps our international travelers away. The availability of PCR tests complicates the travel experience and adds costs. The added cost of a PCR test makes travel to Vancouver more expensive. That makes us less competitive. With every destination in the world competing for the fully vaccinated traveler, we need our government's support to reduce the obstacles so that we can welcome back our international visitors.
As we enter a new phase of the pandemic, one characterized by record-setting vaccination rates and low case counts, it's finally time when we can start to expect to see international travelers again. And after 19 months that we've all experienced, our businesses depend on international travel more than ever. What has already proven to be a difficult 2 summer seasons is evolving into an even more dire winter season. Many small businesses may not survive the winter, and it really doesn't have to be this way. The federal government's imposition of mandatory PCR testing for fully vaccinated travelers is keeping international travelers away, leaving small business owners here in Greater Vancouver area to fend for themselves. As I understand it, the federal government hired a team of experts to recommend health travel policies. This group did not recommend mandatory pre-departure PCR testing for fully vaccinated travelers. We need the federal government to make common sense changes to the rules so that our businesses can stand a chance.
We need not only to remove the PCR testing as was recommended by the expert panel. So we are looking to the expert panel for their advice, removing the PCR test for fully vaccinated individuals. As well, we need consistency where we're seeing the similar approach to travel across not only across the country, but across the world as well. So we're talking costly, we're talking cumbersome, and we're talking confusing. So those are 3 things that could be removed immediately with the government's decision to pull the PCR test for fully vaccinated individuals. The expert panel has given a number of recommendations that can be followed. They are the experts, and we strongly recommend that the federal government follows those.
Yeah, what about other countries though?
Well, I think that we would look to the expert panel, to the recommendations that they gave on how Canada would handle this, but it does bring up how other countries are dealing with this, and there needs to be consistent approach across the world about this, because we were going into a long weekend here. There is the Remembrance Day statutory holiday, and some people are taking advantage of the shorter week, the work week, to travel, and it's a perfect time to bring this up where we are going to see people who are deciding not to come to Canada because of the decision around the PCR testing. The issue that we have with the PCR test, again, is costly and it's cumbersome and it is confusing because there are many tests out there. If you look just at the cost alone, for a family of 4 who are traveling, that can add up to $800 or maybe $1,000 per family, which is really restrictive to coming to visit Canada. So any step that can be taken to remove barriers would be welcomed by travel and tourism sectors and by the business community at large.
Do you have any sense of how many visitors you guys think you're missing out on, especially maybe Americans who would normally drive into Canada? Any sense of how many are just not coming because of what Richard just said, $800 for a family?
Yeah, I can sort of speak to hotel occupancy. We're still treading water across the province at about 50% occupancy. We are about to go into a ski season. We have many hotel operators in the interior, Kootenays, areas like that are nervous. They want to welcome Americans back, for example. They want to take advantage of potentially great early season conditions, but they're nervous about reaching out to those guests about coming and making a last minute decision because these barriers are in place. So the short answer is, and someone alluded to it earlier, our business has been propped up by Canadians and regional visitors helping our hotels. But the reality is there's no recovery until we can open the borders successfully and free of friction. We've been extremely patient as a business community. You look around at other sectors that are thriving. I walked by several film crews on the way over here today. There's businesses that are thriving that we know that there's areas of the economy that are growing. Our sector has not. We've been in sort of a stagnant standstill. Speaking for the hotel sector, we have been nothing but supportive in terms of our support of the health measures and the science. But at the same time, it's time, and our patience is sort of starting to run a little bit thin. And I think we just need to sort of allow our business to get on with it, and this is a step forward. If there's an intermediary step, such as antigen testing, I think we certainly support that. But the less friction, the better.
We're very clear that science and public health is the top priority, and the business community, the tourism travel associations and industry right across Canada has been very clear on this. The expert panel itself has said that PCR testing is not required, should not be required for fully vaccinated travelers. That is what we are looking to. And so if the expert panel is recommending that, we call on the federal government to follow the science and the guidance on that and to make the change to reduce the friction.
Brent Stafford with regulatorwatch.com. This is to kind of the group. Has there been lasting damage specifically with American visitors, do you think, with Canada's image of being welcoming? Because if that tie breaks, which has likely been breaking, can it ever be recovered?
Thank you for the question. Prior to the pandemic, the United States was Vancouver and Canada's largest international market. So to actually say that it's important is an understatement. It is a critically important market for Vancouver and all destinations in Canada. And so to know whether or not, what's the lasting impact, we don't know right now. But what I can tell you that in our destination in 2020, we saw 193 different business meetings and events canceled in our destination. And that was because of where we were at that time. But what we need to do now is bring that business back into our destination. And what we're sharing is that our challenge is the fact that there is that inconsistency around the PCR testing for travelers coming in, Americans coming up here. And when they're looking at rebooking that business for our destination, it just makes this a little bit more complicated. It makes it more difficult. And so it's just easier to go someplace else. And those are those big events that our destination is so reliant on, as well as the individual travelers and people traveling with their families. So it's hard to actually know what the lasting impact is going to be right now. That is something that we have to continue to monitor very, very closely. But what we're saying is listen to what the advisory panels are saying, and as quickly as we can we remove this mandatory testing the PCR test for our fully vaccinated travelers and make Canada, make our destination, make Metro Vancouver more accessible.